time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
Welcome to the Double Stop Podcast. Now, if you like the show, please remember to subscribe in iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On today's show, I got producer Toby Wright. Now, Toby took an interesting path into the producer's chair. He came up through the maintenance department. And honestly, he had to explain that to me because I didn't have a clue what that meant. But by being in maintenance and then an assistant engineer, he was in a studio with Kiss, Metallica, Dokken, and a whole bunch of other big bands. So when he got his first big break by the band you're hearing right now, Canada's Brighton Rock, he was ready. He rode that into massive success with Allison Chains and has been very, very active ever since. This episode took an unexpected twist when he shared his discovery of audio as a healing tool, but I'll let you hear that from the man himself. This episode is the story of Toby Wright, a producer of some of rock's biggest acts, but as you'll learn, a man who has big plans for the power of sound.
Born in New York City, and I grew up in a very musical family, actually. My dad ran Lincoln Center for a while, and he was also on the Board of Education for New York City, so as a music teacher. So I had lots of musical influence in my home. I learned to play all the woodwind instruments quite early, the clarinet, the flute. He's a pro sax player, and I did a little sax work as well, and then just progressed from there.
And when you started showing your musical talents and started wanting to explore that route, was he supportive because he was in the music side of things, or was he suggesting you go a little safer route?
No, he was, very supportive, and I was in the school band and all that kind of stuff, and I guess he just kind of let us. All of us kids kind of seek our own ground when it came to, finding our way, if you will. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So it wasn't really, we weren't really pushed into it yet again. We weren't really like super encouraged either. We had to kind of find our own way.
And did you start with, if you were learning instruments early, did you start playing in bands and whatnot, or did you discover early on that you really were more interested in the recording of the music than perhaps the playing of it?
That's exactly what happened with me. I remember very early on, like 9 or maybe 10, visiting a recording studio in Richmond, Virginia, where my dad was living, and thinking to myself, man, I want to do that. Saw this guy in front of this big, huge board with all these knobs and, just making what I was seeing through the glass, because as they were playing, I was in the control room. So, I was watching everybody out in the room. And they were laying down, it was my dad's saxophone quartet. And so, there was 4 of them in there and, they were doing their thing and it sounded amazing. And I was like, I want to do this.
And what was it about it that was so appealing?
I don't know. It just turned me on.
Clicked, eh?
I don't know what it was. I was really young, so it just kind of clicked. And then years later, I decided after bouncing back and forth from New Mexico to New York that I wanted to go to school in New York and check out a recording program. So I went to NYU and their affiliate program, the Institute of Audio Research. And ended up with a job at Electric Lady Studios.
In terms of that training, what do you feel that really gave you?
Oh, big edge. Schooling is always great because you learn the theory of how things work. And, when you can apply what you've learned in books, in the studio or in your position or in your job or whatever, then it's really beneficial. You just want to keep digging. When you can't apply something that you've learned in school, you just kind of forget it. You know what I mean? We've all done that. You know what I mean? Like history or something, it's like, oh, well, whatever. And you just forget it. But, when you apply something every day that you've learned, it's kind of helpful in expounding your knowledge. So for instance, I went into Electric Lady as a gopher, and I was getting paid $5 a day, and working my tail off, getting lunch and cleaning the toilets, et cetera, et cetera. And it didn't come until later that I was asked to help, set up mics and all that kind of stuff, and sit in on a couple of sessions as an assistant to the assistant. And then one day, the maintenance engineer, Sal Greco, asked me if I'd be interested in joining the team, his maintenance team. And I thought, there's been a whole bunch of upheaval between him and the assistant engineers because they didn't know what they were doing as far as operational, things went in the studio. And I saw that, as a gopher, and I decided, you know what? If I can fix this gear, I can certainly know how to operate it, and I won't get yelled at. So that's what I did. I joined Sal's team and stayed in the maintenance department, for the next 10 years.
It's interesting because I've talked to a bunch of different producers, and they all have their own way in, and some are producing engineers, and some produce and mix only. And you strike me as a very technical gear guy, but you came up through the engineering path, correct?
No, I came up through the maintenance department.
Well, can you explain the difference to me then? What the maintenance, is that taking care of the gear in the studio?
The maintenance engineer is a guy who repairs all the consoles, tape machines, any piece of gear in the studio, computers nowadays, Pro Tools, et cetera, et cetera. He knows he's already set that up, and that room is up and running because of the maintenance engineer. Okay. And he'll come in and fix any problems that you have, or whatever the case may be. Just maintenance wise, just takes care of the room, make sure it's operational for those clients.
And what did doing that for 10 years give you then when you started moving beyond that?
Well, and engineering, recording engineering is the art of recording. In the classical world, they call that a recordist, and in the movie world. Right. So, that's somebody that just records. That's all they do. You know what I mean? So that's a different knowledge base and skill set. So when I moved into that, what happened to me was I was, I built a studio called One on One in North Hollywood where, Metallica ended up recording And Justice for All, and we recorded the first 13 or 14 records in there were all triple platinum or better. And what it was just a big, huge, room, oak room that was in the right place at the right time. We had this great room, and we just invited everybody in the top 10 to come on over and check it out. And they all ended up coming back and recording there.
There's got to be a bit more to it than the right room at the right time then.
Well, just the right room at, that was the hair metal days. That was in 86, 87. And I think that had a lot to do with it because, guys were looking for that big, huge drum sound.
Oh, okay.
And so it was a 50 by 50 or 50 by 60 room with 30-foot ceilings. That's huge. We used to fit 110-piece orchestras in there. So, that's a huge room. And it was all wood, so it was like the inside of a violin. It resonated really well.
So what were some of the early records that you were working on in there?
Oh, God, we did some Motley Crue, Girls, Girls, Girls. We did Poison in there. We did Dan Fogelberg stuff. We did, I don't know, there was a Kiss, there was Heart, there was tons of that old stuff. Anything, a lot of the things that came out in that 5 years period between 86 and 91 was done in that room. A lot of the Metallica and Justice for All and the Black record was recorded there as well.
And your role at that point would be engineer and perhaps assistant engineer?
I was, I actually ended up being the only guy there. So I was the maintenance guy. I was the assistant engineer. I was sometimes the gopher and sometimes the receptionist. Just do whatever it takes. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah.
There we go. We had Lita Ford and Ozzy in there. We had, everybody was through there. You know what I mean?
And so you're just cranking out records. You're working on records one after the other then?
Yeah, assisting mostly because they'd come in with a producer and a recording engineer. Um, so I'd be the assistant engineer and just set everything up in the room because that's your job as the assistant is to know that room that you work in, and help the client get through their day, with no problems. And problems equal downtime, which equals the studio not making money. So as an employee of the studio, you're responsible for keeping that session going.
And then in terms of your own personal growth, working with all these other engineers and producers, how valuable was that for you?
Oh, I learned everything not to do. No, it was invaluable, because just working with guys like Ron Nevison and Ted Templeman, two of my biggest influences and heroes in the recording world, just phenomenal ways to record, the ways they treat their artist and get their performances from their artist. A lot of what went into recording back then, which somehow doesn't now. It's a vital part of capturing music.
Now, technology's changed a lot, and you've worked on both sides of it. Looking back at those days, what were some of the things that perhaps were better, or that perhaps because it wasn't so easy with Pro Tools, what were some of the benefits that you saw back in those days?
The benefits of what?
Well, everybody assumes that because Pro Tools it's easier and faster that it's better, but it's not necessarily the case. Were there some of the benefits of the old analog recording of those days?
Oh, sure, the sound. I think we forget, unless you put a recording on, back to back and switch, and have a switch that you can hear the difference, you won't really recognize the difference. But one of them is the sound. For me, digital sound and MP3s actually hurt my ears. Can't stand the format. It really disgustingly messes up mixes. And it's just the inherent nature of what an MP3 is. It takes all those bytes and bits and takes half of them away and crushes them. It's like, ugh, yuck. WAV files at 24/48. That's pretty much perfect for me right now. No need to go. I don't do the 96K or any of that crazy sampling rate stuff because I just find there's no benefit to my sound. It's just larger files to me, and I've been very, very meticulous in listening. That's what I was, and when I was the head of maintenance at Cherokee Studios in LA, I was in charge of all the monitors, and so I really learned how to listen as I was rebuilding speakers and tuning them for the clients and all that kind of stuff. And the main monitors, when you go into a studio like that, that's sometimes what the clients come in for because they sound great in this room and blah 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 blah. And that's really important that you keep that reputation going. So you really, really learned how to listen. And these days, with all these self-powered Mackie monitors and all this nonsense with, Genelec self-powered stuff, that there's a big, huge bump at 100 hertz, and it's just all crazy.
I noticed that you have a history with Canadian bands. You got Honeymoon Suite, you've got Triumph, you've got Brighton Rock. Is that just coincidence if you're down in the States, or was there some kind of connection that you had with Canadian labels or something?
No, actually, Triumph and which other one did you say?
Well, Honeymoon Suite.
Honeymoon Suite, yeah,
Brighton Rock.
Those two, Honeymoon Suite and Triumph, were produced by other producers, and they just happened to come to the studio that I was working at. And I was an assistant engineer on both of those records. But Brighton Rock, that was my actual first production. They found me through the Triumph guys, who had a studio up in, I don't know if they still have it, but they had a studio in Toronto.
Yeah, Metalworks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they do still have it.
And is it still there?
Yeah, still there. Yeah, Gilmore still
Cool.
runs that.
That's awesome. Love Gilmore, dude. He's an awesome dude. But I think, it was Brighton Rock that came to me, and their manager, Steve Pendergast, at the time, and said, hey, man, would you do some demos? Like a lot of the work that you've done on this band and that band. I said, well, I was just an assistant, but sure, I'd love to. And he came back, and said, "Hey, that is the best sounding set of demos I've ever heard in my life. Can we use it as a record?" I said, "Sure." And we ended up mixing it and using it as a record. Or some parts of it were used as a record. And then I produced Brighton Rock's Love Machine as my very first production ever.
And what were your memories of working on that record? I've got it in my hand right here.
It's awesome. I loved it. I loved a lot of the songs on it. The band got dropped after that record because pretty much we refused to turn the guitars down. And Jerry McGee, they're back together now, I think.
Yeah, they are.
I've seen on the web. But he went head to head with, the head of Warner Brothers at the time. And I think that the whole thing was like they were too heavy of a band for Canada, period. So they ended up getting dropped. That was one of the main factors. But, we were just of the opinion, we make music to make music, and there's no, let's not have any walls up, just make music and see what happens.
And they also kind of reinvented their sound there because they were pretty keyboard heavy on the previous two records, and this time they dropped the keyboards and turned up the guitars.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted to, kind of turn it around into more of a rock band than what was going on in that scene at the time, which was a lot of keyboards. So, we didn't use any. We used a lot of keyboards, actually, but just, back in the mix a little bit.
Yeah, and there's some piano in there as well.
Absolutely.
And I understand the track, the re-record, like the remake of the song Cocaine, that was done live in the studio. Is that true?
Yeah, so that was one of those demos that made it.
Ah, okay.
That was absolutely live in the studio. And that was like, whoa, holy shit, this is amazing. And it sounds pretty badass even today.
It does, yeah. That's 91. That's right at the end of bands with bigger hair. And then grunge hits, music scene changes. Did that affect you at all, or was it business as usual for you?
No, I was starting to, I had gone up to Seattle at that point, after the Brighton Rock thing and, family, this, that, the other. I ended up in Seattle for a while, and I met the Allison Chains guys. And then I went back down to L.A., and I met their A&R guy, and I was like, man, and that's when, Man in the Box and all that came out, and I was like, man, I want to work with this fucking band right here. These guys are amazing. And, one thing led to another, and I did 2 songs for a soundtrack, which was the Last Action Hero soundtrack, and that kind of got me in the door with Alice. We recorded, we had a great time, and then, somebody else mixed it, and they didn't like it. And so they ended up hiring me for Jar of Flies because they didn't like that guy's mixing. And so I was like, okay, I'd love to do an EP with you guys. Let's do it. And we, and that's a whole other crazy story.
Well, I understand that they kind of came in and wrote it in the studio.
Yeah, we spent 10 days, and that was it. They were hot off Lollapalooza, coming out of Australia. And they were just hot after that whole tour, and came right into the studio. And it was funny because I asked Jerry when we spoke when he was in Australia. He asked me if I wanted to do an EP with him. I said absolutely, and send me some songs. He said, yeah, okay, I got like 17 of them. Okay, well, they won't make it up there in time, so because we're on our way back, we'd like to meet you in the next week or two, up in Seattle. Oh, okay, cool, let's do it. So we all got in the control room, and I was like, hey, what about those songs? He's like, funny thing about those songs, what? I don't have any. So I said, well, what do you got? He goes, I got a chorus of something, I'll just play it. We'll see what happens. Okay, cool. He goes, do you mind if we jam for the next 10 days? I was like, thinking in my head, jam with the best band in the world? Fuck yeah, let's just jam for the next 10 days, see what happens. And we, the attitude in the room was, whatever happens, happens. If it comes out, it comes out. If it doesn't, we had fun trying. And it was the first EP to ever debut at #1.
It's funny, when I talked to John Cudiberti about different records he's worked on, he did a couple He just did a new Sammy Hagar, and he did a George Lynch solo record in the early '90s, and those are the two times where the artist didn't come in with, these are my dozen songs and all demoed up and ready to go, and he couldn't deal with it. He hated it. But for you, it seems like you're like, yeah, okay, whatever, and you go with it. How do you feel about the difference between artists who come in completely prepared and artists who are not prepared?
It depends on the artist, and it depends on the time in their life as well. Could Alice do it again? Well, they haven't, so I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. That was a once in a lifetime experience. And if I hadn't been open to it, oh man, you guys need songs and all this, why don't you go write some songs, see you later, that would have fucked everything up. You never would have had Jar of Flies. So I'm a guy who lets experience happen and, go with the flow to a certain degree. As you have to have, if you want to sit and write in the studio, you better have some money to back it up. If you do, cool. And you want to spend it, cool. If you don't, then, you're barking up the wrong tree. You better go home and, or write as cheaply as you can and, get stuff going on as best you can and go from there. You know what I mean?
Have there ever been times that's happened for you where the artist isn't prepared and it's not happening and you have to kind of put your foot down?
Yeah, there's been a couple times. Just one artist, weren't prepared because they were doing something else and, whatever their excuses were. I've gotten into, a couple of arguments with people about how they conduct themselves in the studio. This is their life. I'm here for you. I'm not here to be a dictator in any way. I'm just here to get the best out of you. And if you're not prepared, that kind of fucks up my whole day, And, when it's not really about me, but it's about staying on schedule when you say you're going to be, And if things go a little awry, hey, things go a little awry. Whatever, as long as, we can cover it and there's no harm done. So I always look at the big picture, as well as, what's going on at that moment. You have to keep your goals in mind at all times. What are you there for? You're there to capture music. You're there to make a record as best you can for the time given and in that artist's life.
Yeah, and keep it on budget.
Yeah, and that's really important, especially today. When budgets are, pretty much non-existent anymore. It's people fucking out there trying to do shit. And I get it. I'm all about helping out my artists with budget. I have bills to pay too, but at the same time, I like to work with artists that like to work. If you're serious about your craft and you don't have that much dough in your pocket, maybe I can help you out. But maybe I can't too. It's not all about hey, throw them an auto-tune, it'll be fine. No. I look for real performers that can actually sing and perform and play their instrument. And, I'm not interested in, one note. Okay, now I'll edit the next note and I'll edit the next note. No, thank you. Let's rock and let's make some music. And, because at the end of the day, you can make a great record with somebody, but at the end of the day, if they can't perform that record, how are you ever going to, how is that piece of work ever going to get recognized and or be quote unquote successful? You have to get out there to play it for people.
When you work with a band like Korn, is that a bit more of a difficult thing to do because perhaps there's a bit more going on that may be a bit more difficult to recreate live?
Recreating live is pretty much not my problem.
Yeah.
I
fair.
make music and songs in the studio for that moment given. If we put something on a track that you can't recreate later, take a sample with you. That's all. If it's that important to the song, because you don't need to, as an artist on stage in a live band, you don't need to recreate every single sound that you hear on your record. You need to recreate the melodies, the harmonies, the rhythms. The main stuff that you hear in the song is what you need to recreate live, in my opinion. So a lot of the ear candy that you hear on CDs, that's not recreated. live, unless people take out, Pro Tools rigs and play a bunch of samples. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine too. Nothing against those people who do that. That's just, that's just wanting to give a full show to the audience is all I think about that. Unless they're lip syncing, that's a whole different story.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You can use backing tracks all day long, dude, to enhance your thing. Once you put vocals on it, it becomes a kind of a letdown, because then you never know, like, is he really singing now or not?
That's true.
So I'd much rather see a band struggle and try really hard than, a perfect show, that sounds the same every night. It sounds just like the record. Why? Because they're playing the record, basically. I'd rather not see that show,
And then you get the bands that'll play a different set every night. And that's when you go next level for me.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that you have to have the repertoire to do that, first of all. Like Fish, they're a big jam band.
Yeah.
But they can play a different set every night for 6 months, and it'd be amazing. And they're just that good of musicians. And I love those guys. I think they're amazing.
Have you ever worked with them?
I worked with Trey. I did one of Trey's, solo, his first solo record, and I also mixed the Oysterhead record.
On the next Allison Chains record you worked on, I would imagine it was a very different experience than guys coming in and jamming.
Yeah, it was quite a different experience than that.
Anything you can share? I know you got to be careful to preserve relationships.
No, I always do, and I have nothing but love for Allison Chains, Jerry Cantrell, and the entire Alice organization. I love them, and I always will. And I have nothing bad to say, period, because it was another extremely amazing experience. It lasted for about 8 or 9 months.
Oh wow!
And it was studio every day, and just kind of write the songs as we go and capture the vocals as we go, and just keep on going until we're done. And it was a long, lengthy process, because of a number of different factors, but that was just the way it was at the time. No big deal, just work. It's a job. You know what I mean? Just like the dude who goes in 9 to 5. He knows his hours. I didn't really know my hours. The studio was open 24 hours a day. So, whenever anybody wanted to come in and play, come on in. Let's do it. I'm ready. And that's the kind of attitude you have to have. Whenever the musician is ready to lay his shit down, be there for him. Because that's when they feel creative and inspired. And just because you might be sleeping, it might be 4 o'clock in the morning, get your ass out of bed and go to work. What's the big deal? You love what you do, right? And because if you don't, you're in the wrong business.
And did they have a lot of material written before they started recording, or again, was it written in the studio?
There was a bunch written in the studio. There was we had come in with a bunch of songs that Jerry had written because we were going to do a solo record. And, that was before his first solo record that I did. That was kind of the impetus to get everybody going was, oh, Jerry's in the studio with Toby, and they're writing some songs. Oh, cool. Oh, what's going on? Who's recording what? What's happening? So you get, the band's curiosity had to be piqued. And then we finally got in the studio and everything got rolling.
When you did the Unplugged record, again, your relationship solid, and it just brought you right back in to do the live record?
Absolutely.
Is that something you've done often? It's not something I've seen a lot of live performance recording and engineering. Do you like that a lot as well?
Oh, absolutely. I love to record, mix shows and stuff like that. It's awesome. That one in particular, I'm responsible for everything you hear, obviously, and a lot of what you see. And, the reason being is because, when we were there, just had to, MTV has the rules, or did at the time, that there were no overdubs allowed. And you can play that song as many times as you want until you get the performance that you want to be represented. Just no overdubs.
Oh, wow.
So, okay, cool. So we set out and we started doing stuff, and a couple 3 hours later we were done. And in the meantime we did like 20 something, I don't know how many takes it was of Sludge Factory. A lot, because Lane kept forgetting the lyrics. And that's represented on the DVD. I put, when I mixed the DVD and put it all together, I put 3 or 4 different starts of of Sludge Factory, just to show a little bit of side of the band, like, hey, we're human here.
Yeah, that's cool.
And yeah, it turned out well. It was well received. The band liked to show that kind of stuff too. So it was fun, and I did. It just, that record for me was one of the high points in my sonic career, because I spent probably a month mixing it after it was done, and then when I brought it in to be mastered to Stephen Markison in L.A., he goes, I walked in like 45 minutes, an hour after he was working on it, and he says, I go, how's this record going? And he goes, because he'd done like 5 or 6 or 7 records before that of mine, and he liked my work and I liked his, so why not? And he said, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this record. I'm like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, did I fuck something up? He goes, oh no, I just can't make it any better. I'm like, what do you mean? You're the mastering guy. You're supposed to make it better if it's fucked up. He goes, that's the thing. It's not fucked up at all. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, go look. And at I went to the back of the 2-track machine, the half-inch master, and it was plugged directly into the 1630, which is, the 1630 is what they used to use for CD glass masters before they would go to production. And that's what they would capture when they mastered. That's what they would capture it on. So he just played all the recordings right off the half-inch tape, right onto there, and it was done. Went to manufacturing, done. So there's no EQ, there's no nothing. As you hear that record is what came off of the console, basically. And I'm super proud of that because, who's done that before? And I've only done it once.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, just to show how rare that is, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've made a lot of records, and, who knows how many. And, that's the only time it ever happened. And, could I just mix something and put it out? Sure. But chances are it's going to be lacking this or need less of that or more of this or something, to help it out. But when a mastering guy says, hey, I can't help it, you wrung it out, dude. It's done. Then it's done. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Are there any other albums with stand out in that way for you, in some kind of technical way of how you produced it? Any other top records for you?
Well, there's highlights. When I think about each and every one of the records I've done, there's highlights to them all. Learning experiences of them all. And I think, some things, I love the guitar sound of that record I did. I like the drum sound on this record. And, it's like I try to capture the moment in that artist's life and their career. And I like to capture the individuality of each artist as well and represent that, to the public and their fans, because I think that's a lot of why people buy music, because, this day and age with this, alternative radio or whatever the heck it's called, that every band sounds alike, to me is the most boring stuff you can ever listen to. It sounds like one long song, just change the singer and do this or do that. You know what I mean? It's like, huh? So when each band has their individuality, for me, you can play 2 notes of a song and I'll go, oh, that's Korn, or oh, that's ZZ Top, or oh, that's the Eagles, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can definitely recognize a band from their sound. You know what I mean? And that's I think, really something to keep. I have bands coming from all over the world to record with me. And I go all over the world to record with them as well. And I love to keep the individuality. I ask them to bring their instruments. Well, we're coming from overseas. We just want to rent a bunch of stuff. Well, if you rent a bunch of stuff, it's going to sound the same as everybody else who rents a bunch of that stuff. So let's not do that. Bring your stuff and let's have your sound on your record. What do you think about that? That usually turns people on. It's like, fuck yeah, all right, cool. Well, I just have a little old, blah 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 Sears guitar and a, Matchbox amplifier or something, or whatever, and the speaker's blown. Well, bring it. Is that what your sound is? Yeah. Well, bring it. Well, I know how to get it with plugins, dude.
Yeah.
Never mind. I just go DI off my acoustic guitar.
There's always a lot of focus on the evolution of, say, a guitar player. What's Jerry Cantrell sound like now compared to off the first record, and how has he evolved? How about for you? How have you evolved as an engineer or as a producer? As you've gotten older, more experienced, technology's changed, how do you feel you've evolved?
Along with it, I think with the change of technology, we've all had to grow in a lot of ways. I skipped typing class, dude, to go get stoned. And here I find myself on a computer. I'm like, how do you do this? This is crazy. So I never should have skipped typing class, is what it comes down to. Had I known the age of computers was going to be so, take over the rest of our lives, I would have never skipped that class. Mm-hmm. So I've had, it's a learning curve right there. Learn how to type. Okay. So I've done that. All right, cool. But it's interesting, because with the age of technology and its changes, here comes Pro Tools, and all of a sudden everybody's auto-tuning and doing this and doing that, and it's really affected the public the most, because with all the pop stuff that's out there, everything is so heavily auto-tuned that they are listening to perfect pitch, and it's trained them to know what it is, and which to me takes away a lot of feel. Mm-hmm. From things like Janis Joplin, for instance, sure, who had an amazing voice, but was she directly on pitch all the time? Hell no. She was all over the place. But that doesn't matter because it was feeling. It was gliding from one note to the other without going, and having that vocoder kind of sound that, auto-tune is so famous for now. So it's really trained the public, and when you try and get a singer out there, that's why a lot of people think, oh, so-and-so is really bad live. Well, you're not hearing them tuned. Sometimes they're not the best singers, So it's the age of technology has bred, to me, a lot of bedroom musicians, if you will.
Yeah, they're recording off their laptop now, yeah.
Yeah, and they're singing into their fucking laptop, Why should we have a $25,000 fucking, C24 or C12? You know what I mean? What's the difference? Well, I know the difference, but the question really is, why is somebody using, a laptop to sing into and getting results from that you don't have to go in the studio to get anymore. But then here comes, okay, well, that's a whole different change in the way we perceive music, and things are now possible in the click of 3 buttons to put a filter and a delay on something than it was back then, because then you had to go patch it in, you had try and filter this out, do this, do that, figure out delay times, blah blah blah. Nothing's really snapped to a grid. They might have played to the click, but nobody edited it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So things were a lot looser, and you had to go more by feel then than you do now. Now it's more technical and precise, and boom, boom, boom. And you have to be that way to compete in today's market, because that's what the public expects.
When you talk about how the audience's ears have been trained, is that something you've, in terms of auto-tune and whatnot, is that something you've had to kind of make an effort not to happen to your own ears, to keep them pure?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm a victim of it as well because, I listen to records, I listen to music, I listen to other people's music. Um, and, I hear what they do, and I can tell when something's over auto-tuned. Sometimes I will tune a vocal or do this or do that just because it sounds better, and it sounds stronger, if it's actually on pitch right there rather than that quote-unquote feel thing. Um, you know, I like to give my artists a competitive edge. And if that's what it takes to just be competitive, then you have to do that for them, whether you like it as a producer or not. If you're recording Barbra Streisand, who has perfect pitch, then chances are you're not going to be using auto-tune. You know what I mean? But if you're recording somebody else, an up-and-coming artist, or just somebody who's trying, they're probably not going to have perfect pitch, and so you're going to have to edit that in some way or another, to be competitive. Because everybody's got auto-tune who's got Pro Tools. Period. It doesn't come with it, but it's a really good plug-in to have.
In terms of your workflow now, you talked about when you were starting out and you had, the massive studio. Is it basically, a Pro Tools rig at home, or do you still work out of a studio, or do you rent a room, or how does it work for you?
I rent a room sometimes. I have a mixing suite in my house in Nashville. And that's worked out quite well for me, which is, that's Pro Tools only. But I have, looking around, 4 space racks full of analog gear that's all plugged in.
Right.
So there's a lot of, EQ and compression and mic pre's and, things that actually the front end that make a difference. In the analog in the digital world these days. I'm not cool with the mic pre on my computer being my vocal mic pre. I'm just not. I can hear the difference in quality between that and, say my Neve 1081. You know what I mean? And I better be able to. That's my job.
Yeah, exactly.
I prefer Class A electronics type of front end. It just, makes it whole and be warmer right away, than any of these digital mic pre's that are out there.
Now let's talk about some of your more recent projects. Did you work on the new Night Ranger?
I tracked drums for the new Night Ranger record and mixed a single.
That's an interesting combination. Drums and mixing the single. How did that happen?
Well, Kelly lives here in Nashville.
Oh, okay.
And so, he and I have been friends for a really long time. And, we were talking about this, that, and the other. And he was out in California with Jack and Brad in their studios. And, it was like Kelly needed to record some drums and he didn't feel like going out there. So he hired me and we went into a studio and, played all their Pro Tools sessions. Just got kick-ass sounds. And, then I edited them and, made them sound real huge and stuff, and off they went. Yeah. And then they went, they were recording out there. They didn't bring me in until they had problems with the mix. And, they were like, hey, can you breathe any life into this mix? And I was like, yeah. And I did my thing, and, they went, holy smoke, that sounds like a single. Okay, cool. Thanks. So. And
what other projects have you been working on?
Let's see. At the moment, I'm working on a guy by the name of Kyle Castronovo, and his project is called Premonitions of Panic. And that's pretty cool. It's a pretty heavy industrial type thing. His dad is Dean Castronovo, the Journey drummer and singer.
Yep.
So, he's got a really talented kid, and he's written, a great record. I went out to Portland and captured that in their studio out there, and then brought it home here to mix. And I'm about, 7-8 songs deep into 11 songs or so. And so we're just about finished with that. And that's going to be a kick-ass record. It was a lot of fun. I mixed a band called Red Wine Hangover here in town. new upcoming band. Been, developing a couple of, other artists as well from here in town, and mixed a record by a band called the Young Royals, which actually that's Dean's side project. That's how we kind of got involved with each other. And he is like, my buddy Eric is the lead singer for that band. And he called me up and asked me if I could, they'd had it mixed once and, got charged all this money and hated it. And then came to me and said, hey, can you mix this? I was like, yeah, well, hey, could you do a trial mix for us? I was like, all right, for you? Yes. And Dean is in the band and, so on and so forth. And so I wanted to kind of impress him, so I kicked ass on it. And, and then Dean told me later that he was really scared about this Young Royals record because, he thought it was done. It sounded horrible, and he thought the songs were for shit. And, after he heard it mixed, the way it is now, he was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So it was kind of interesting what a really good mix will do,
It's interesting because somebody who's mixing, it's like in the film side, the editor, a different editor will make a completely different movie with the same footage.
Right.
And it's the same with mixing. Right. Is it simply your ears? What is it that can make one mix sound like the song is bad and the next mix make it sound like the song is fantastic?
Well, let me just preface what I'm about to say with nobody's ever bought a record for the sound of the record.
Sure.
They like the songs on the record to be buying that record. And I'm going to go with 99.999%. Yeah, sure. You buy a Steely Dan record or whatever, Supertramp record, and just to check it out because you heard it sounded great, maybe. But I've never heard of that really. You know what I mean? Usually people buy it for the songs. It doesn't matter what it sounds like. If you listen sonically to records in the 70s and early 80s, they sound like shit, dude. They really do. Pink Floyd doesn't really sound that great. It's got amazing ambience. But if you actually, listen to the sounds of that record, Nine Inch Nails blows it away. You know what I mean? But it's completely different because they created all that shit in the analog world. You know what I mean? So, comparatively speaking to today's sounds and technology, a lot of that stuff sounded really poor. But, compared to what we can do with sound so easily today and manipulate it. I think it's... I lost my train of thought as I was going through there. What was the question again?
It was just the difference of one mixer over another, how they can take a song that, the original mix, he thought the song was bad because he didn't like the mix. And then you mix it, and then all of a sudden he loves the song.
Well, I think he was less than excited about the mixes that he got at first. He knew he liked the songs because he had, helped write them and played on them. And he had a certain expectation for them when he heard them. I think that's half the battle right there is expectation. But a good song will always stand out of a bad mix, unless it's really, really bad. At a certain point, it's taste. I don't like, super compressed, really loud mixes. It just doesn't do anything for me. There's no dynamics. I can't hear through the mix. There's no ambience. There's no depth to it when you get that compressed. Is compression necessary? Well, maybe. It depends how you mix and what you're mixing. It just depends. And I think all of these plugins to me are tools. And, all these boxes I have here in my studio are all tools. And, just like if I was a carpenter and I tried to, use a jackhammer to pound in a nail, something's going to happen really wrong there. Something's going to get messed up. You just need to pick the right tool for the job. You know what I mean? So, and when you overdo things, it just gets to a point where you get lost in the song. You get lost in it all, and I've heard guys get lost in their Pro Tools rigs, and they use 5,007 plugins, and then what do you got? It's just, it's really hard. I mean, to my ear, I still to this day don't like Pro Tools because of the fact, and or using plugins, due to the fact that if you capture something properly and correctly, to begin with, as soon as you put a plugin on it, it gets smaller and thinner without touching anything. You can put on an EQ and it'd be bypassed, and it does the same thing to my ear. I'm like, every plugin? Well, pretty much every one I have. It's just a little tiny bit, but it really, and you stack those up, if you have 50 tracks and you stack 4 on each, that's 200 plugins you're using.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, really? That's a lot of processing for a little bit of music. Was it not captured that good? Because, I can help you with that.
So is that the key for you then? Is capture it right the first time and then try to minimize the effects in the post?
Absolutely. There's some things that, it's like, oh, we're going to affect that later, so let's just record it clean now, and I'll do that trick later. Or, I prefer that all sounds that are going to be used, when I'm mixing a track, all sounds that are going to be used be recorded, because if I don't have your plugin, I can't recreate it. And, I refuse to go out and buy plugins just because my clients have them. Why don't you just print that sound, and that way I'll have the sound. I don't need the plugin, because I have, I do have a lot of plugins, but at the same time, it's a matter of, knowing when to use them and when it's right to use one.
It sounds like you've grudgingly accepted the fact that today you need to use Pro Tools, but you're going to try to minimize the damage as much as you can.
I wouldn't say grudgingly. I've grown into using it. And, I was one of the first guys to, check out the 16-bit version of Pro Tools 1. And I knew it was coming. They asked me if I'd keep it in the studio at one-on-one, and I said, well, if I can hear the difference, then no. Because why would I? If the difference is better, well, then we have to talk. But if the difference is worse, then no. It's not worth it. So we went through the whole exercise of, 16-bit recording in Pro Tools versus analog tape on a Studer 800. A Studer won, hands down, every time I could pick it. So Pro Tools got kicked out. Pro Tools, 2 or 3 came along, and when they upgraded to 24-bit, I couldn't tell the difference at that point, at 2448. And that's when I decided, okay, well, let's check this shit out. This is kind of cool. And I started using it for storage, because there weren't that many plugins back then. So you really couldn't manipulate stuff the way you can now as easily. You know what I mean? So I started using it for storage and backups. And then, because the more you run analog tape, it gets degraded as you run it over the heads of the tape machine. So it's real easy to mess stuff up quick, and if you have to keep overdubbing and overdubbing and overdubbing, you're better to do it in the digital domain so you don't mess up all your precious sounds that you've worked so hard to create,
Okay, Toby, I think we got it.
I did want to mention one other thing.
Great.
And that was I'm also involved in something called sound healing. And it's about sound that can help you relax and sleep, and even in some cases cure disease. So it's I founded a company that's working hard on getting patents for that kind of stuff, because I think it's really, really important that we're all healthy out there.
Can you explain a little more about it? How does this work?
Well, it's simply, let's see, I guess what's the best way to do it? I use, different frequencies will affect your body differently.
Okay.
So let's just say, for instance, and everything in this universe has a vibration. It is made up of vibration. You are, every ounce of you is, the chair you're sitting on, the computer screen you're looking at. There's frequency all around you, from light to still, where we can't detect movement, but there really is. And it goes from the light that you can see right now to, hearing my voice, which is, a complex frequency. So, as compared to a sine wave, say 1,000 hertz. So what happens basically in theory is that, if I can get, let's say you have a liver disease, for instance, and you can measure the vibration of that liver, and if I can match it and get it to vibrate at its healthy frequency, then it will get rid of all its toxins and be considered healthy again. This practice has been used since the 16th century in many different forms. You might have heard of the glass bells and, the Tibetan bells and all kinds of frequencies, things like this. And it's interesting to me that you can, use the bottom end of sound, which will help you sleep and dream and keep you asleep and all kinds of stuff. Because what happens is your brain wants to sync itself to your outside world. It wants to always be in sync. So let's say you're in the city in New York. Let's say you're in New York City and you're in the subway at rush hour. Well, we can all imagine what that might be like. And you're going to be at a very heightened state and, rushing and trying to pushing through and doing this and doing that and hurrying, right? And your brain's going to be going about 15 to 20 hertz, let's say. For example. And so if you, conversely, when it's nice and quiet in your home, you've just got done relaxing for the evening, you go lay down in bed and, turn out the lights and everything's nice and quiet. It's a nice, calm, peaceful feeling. And, your brain is slowing down and it's, probably nearing 6, 7, 5. And at that point you start falling asleep. And a good sleep is down around 4 to 7 hertz in REM, which is where the body will do a lot of its healing. So I've developed a product where I can keep you down in REM for as long as the CD is playing in the room or in your ears, and just that helps you heal at night. At night you drift in and out of REM 5, 6, 10 times sometimes. And maybe you're in it for 2 minutes, maybe you're in it for an hour. But, it's not like everybody is different. You know what I mean? It just depends on too many factors. But this kind of, these frequencies, I can, definitely put you to sleep and keep you there. I've developed also, some things where, I have sleep programs where I can program, a night's sleep. If I only need 4 hours, I set it for 4 hours, and at, 3 hours and 50 minutes, it begins waking me up by, just going faster and faster, and then all of a sudden I'm awake. And I don't really need coffee, and It's awesome.
Interesting.
That's just one of the things I've been working on for a while.
And how did you get started in that area? Obviously, it's related to sound, which is your area, but that's an interesting path.
Yeah. Well, it really had nothing to do with my profession, except for I was on the way home from a business meeting and got into a car accident. And, had really bad nerve damage to the whole right side of my body. Every doctor I saw would say, "Here, Mr. Wright, I don't know what's wrong with you, but here's this prescription, go get it filled." And I'd look at it and it'd be for some kind of pain medication. I never told them I was in pain. It was, in fact, the opposite. I could not feel my fingers or my head, or, my eye was weird, or, whatever. It was just, I had lots of nerve damage. So, I started thinking about, well, how can I, help myself? Let's see if there's any information on nerve damage on the internet. That's what it's there for. Check it out. So I start going through, literally sitting at the computer reading for as long as I could, every day, and finally came across something called sound healing, and was like, what the hell is this? And I started delving into it. And then shortly thereafter, I started having a dream. And the dream started coming back every night. And believe it or not, it's still there 6 years later. Every night.
You have the same dream every night.
Yep.
Wow.
Have for 6 years. And, I don't know how long it is. It could last for a minute. It could last for, an hour and a half. I don't know. But, the dream's pretty short. I can tell it pretty quickly. And so it's like, it's in the dream, it just, there's sound healing in the dream. And it's, it just keeps going. I hear in the dream, I'll just tell you the dream. I drive up, the dream is such that I drive up to a Mediterranean looking building in a hilly setting. I go in, there's the same blonde woman there every time. She says, hello, Mr. Wright, welcome back. Today you're in red 12 or yellow 15 or purple 72 or whatever, a color and a number. Behind her, there are all these arched colored hallways. I go down, find the appropriate color, the appropriate number, put on find the door, go in, put on a gown, lay face down on what looks like a massage table with a, little donut thing, right?
Yep.
Somebody comes in, they put headphones on me, and I hear this tonality is the best way to put it. It's not noise, it's not music, it's just a tonality. And that plays in my ears at the beginning of the dream. That plays in my ears for, I guess roughly an hour, and then I'm tapped on the shoulder, the headphones are taken off, and I'm told, thank you. See the receptionist on the way out, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bye.
And does the tone change depending on what room you're in?
No. What happens is it takes another. The tone is always the same no matter what room I'm in that they put in my ears. As the dream progressed, that was the first part of the dream.
Okay.
Right? And then when, as years and time rolled on in life, the dream changed a little. It was always, I did that same thing up to that point, and then it had another, then they came in and they turned me over and they put speakers on each side of my body and played a different tonality into my body as I was listening to the same tonality that I had previously. So two different tonalities going at the same time. And then it progressed to light. And the room was just bathed in light and color. And come to find out through just some hints in the dream that the color that I was seeing was related to the color that was pumping into my body.
Okay.
The tonality that was pumping into my body from the speakers. So, for instance, there was a color up there that represented, the frequency 412 hertz. And somewhere in the world there's a formula that I've yet to find, and I'm looking for it, that will take audio frequencies and multiply them up into colors of light. Somewhere there is. Light's a different energy, I know that, but there's always energy conversions. Right, so somewhere there's a formula that will give me I'm looking for this way to project this light, because that's pretty much the only thing holding it back. So, but anyway, I thought it was really interesting that I made 15 different titles of things, diseases that I thought that could use some help, and I have friends that have this problem or that problem, and let's see if they'll listen to this, and let's see what happens to them. And they were fine with it. They're like, yeah, I'll check it out. I made stuff for singers, ear, nose, and throat type stuff, which when I turned on to a couple of singers, their singing improved, their whole cavity of their head improved. Let's just put it that way. Their voice sounded richer, with females and males. It's things like that I really like. Okay, cool. This is actually working, and it works well.
Is this sound while they sleep keeps them in REM where their body is optimal healing. Is that the theory behind it?
Yes. Besides, giving you a really good night's sleep, your body heals when in REM, right? And so I have cell regeneration frequencies in there that help your body along. Your body naturally will do that. It will regenerate your cells while you're sleeping in REM only, right? So if I can keep you in REM for longer than you would be naturally, then it sounds to me, in theory, like you're going to heal faster.
Exactly. Yeah.
And more. Right? So that, theory says anyway. It might not work with everybody out there. And I'm no fucking doctor. This is just, some crazy shit that I dreamt, and I've been trying it for like 6 years now. And, I'm not going to tell you I can heal anything or cure anything. I've found a way to minimize disease, however. And, in practice, it's working in my life. That it really helped me through my nerve damage, because that's pretty much gone, I have, residual right eye nerve something, that when I stare at a computer for too long, it gets real tired. So that might be my age as well. Doctors have said, oh, here's these glasses, old man. I'm like, oh, fucker.
And did you go back to the doctors after you recovered and explain to them what you did to hear their reaction?
No. It's a waste of time.
Yeah, you didn't think they'd be too receptive?
Yeah, they, because I asked about alternative, non-Western medicine type practices, and most of them weren't really hip to it. I went to a couple of, Eastern people with acupuncture and acupressure and all kinds of stuff. And it just didn't, they were more receptive to what I was feeling and hearing in my mind than, because I, take trust in those people, and I'd tell them about it. You know what I mean? It'd get to the point where, I had to recreate that shit, man. It was bugging me because I was hearing it in my head every night. And I finally figured out how to recreate it. And that was the correlation between sound healing and, just stumbling across it on the internet.
And what's your next steps for it then?
I've been creating some stuff here and there and trying to get it out into the business world. I'd like to, if you go and you Google sound healing, you're going to come up with about, 25,000 products. A lot of them don't do anything beneficial, as beneficial as this might. A lot of people have pink noise, and they, great guitar, little meditational things and all this kind of stuff. I agree. It's good. It is good to relax and calm down, and yes, it will definitely slow your brain down. I do it in a more precise way, is all. Because there's no music involved. I find when I put music with this, the music interferes, and kind of rubs against it, if you will. Because the music's constantly changing, and I hear instruments out of tune all the time, and the most important thing is the frequency that your ear and your body are feeling. So if that frequency isn't spot on, then you're not going to create what needs to be created within the sound formula, if you understand what I mean. Like, there's formulas to these, what do you call them, tonalities, right? Some of them are made up of as little as 15 different sine wave frequencies, and some are as complex as 60. And it's just a matter of what it is and how it, how it's embedded in the body. So, I've had to be doing a lot of medical reading and comparing, and, just kind of, and I've come to the conclusion that there's no way I can hurt you, by the way.
That's a start.
Yeah, I mean, Sound, yes, sound can kill. There's no doubt about it. Will this hurt you in any way, shape, or form? The answer is no.
No, but it might just help.
It might help. It just might help. You got it. That's up to you. If it helps you, awesome. I'm so glad you found it and it found you. And I have there's about 200 or so people out there with what I call the Relax series, which is it's this tonality, but I've also put ocean sounds on one and wave sounds on another, because the ocean and rain and ocean, and both water, but they are two of nature's most, relaxing type sounds. I always fall asleep at the beach, and I always fall asleep and I want to go to bed when it's raining out. So, but I made those and I put the tonality under those for people that just the tonality was a little bit too strong for. And trying it out with a lot of my friends at first, some of them were like, ooh, this kind of gives me anxiety. And then we figured out, oh, you're listening too loud. They started listening a lot lower and got better results. And, some people, still felt a little bit anxious. So I was like, okay, well, let's try this. And I made, her favorite sound was rain. And so I made one with rain. And she, to this day, loves it and listens to it every night.
And is this something that people can get now?
Not quite yet. Working on that as we speak. There's no website. The only information on it is on my website, which is tobywrightmusic.com. And you can also contact me at toby@tobywrightmusic.com for any information on it. And I'm just trying to just get it going. It's kind of, I want to get it medically certified somehow. Because, like I said, this sound healing thing is not really recognized, but at the same time, there's a lot of junk out there. So if I have the endorsement of the medical community, that certifies it as, hey, this can really help. And we found that it does help, and tests show that it will help. That's the kind of thing I'm looking to do right now.
Oh yeah, that makes all the difference in the world. Legitimizes it completely.
Absolutely. And I think that, that's key to it being a household name and a household item, where I could, try and peddle, I could probably peddle 10,000, 20,000 of these things pretty easily, just the way it is right now. But that's not the way I don't think it's intended. You know what I mean? It's just, it's better than that. And it needs to be recognized as that. And so if you have to be recognized as that, then you need certification from somewhere, somehow.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's what I've been up to.
And that was our show with Toby Wright. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to check out the other shows on the Cast Iron Ring at castironring.com. I'll be back next Monday with a whole new show.